Annie thought when we were talking about today that it would be a good idea for me to speak about why I wanted to come to EQAO at this juncture. And for me, it is because since I became an educator in 1991, I've wanted to serve as an agent of hope. And very early in my career, I came across a young man in grade 10 English who did not know how to read. And as a grade 10 English teacher, I realized that I needed to teach him how to read, and to do that in a classroom with other students with various levels, and yet somehow he had ended up in my grade 10 classroom unable to read, and I had to discover that 3 weeks in through the assessments that I was doing with him and his rejection of the work. So for my career in education, I have relied on EQAO data alongside other important information that we have at the local level to determine where interventions are most needed and to provide support from an equity lens so that all students have an opportunity to achieve at a high level. I'm very proud that earlier the panel, Pushing the Limits book, Kelly, do I have the title right? Okay. That one of the chapters in that book is dedicated to a school that I had the joy to work with based on their EQAO achievement and the recognition that we needed to do more for those children, that they deserved more. And it was that flagged it for us, and we really did some innovative work. And that was just one example. So I do believe, obviously because I chose to come to EQAO, in the data, in having large-scale assessment to make a difference, but always emphasizing alongside other data, and that it's not just EQAO. I also think that after 21 years, it was time to modernize EQAO. The classroom has changed significantly in that time, as has our expectations of what it means to be successful. So EQAO has 4 core functions, and I won't go into all of them because I know I only have 10 minutes, but 2 that I want to highlight is the research one. We do take the information that we have about every student over time and partner with many researchers to benefit student learning and student outcomes over time. We're a partner actually with People for Education, but also places like the Offord Center, so dedicated to children's health and looking at for children who have illness over time, what that means in their journey in school. So the research part of our work is one that's very important as far as creating research-based informed policies, not just in education, but in other areas as well, potentially. The item that we're most known for, of course, are our provincial assessments. And so I think that's one of the areas that, as we look at what we measure, that it's very polarizing. And so I read recently, I think it was Salman Rushdie who said, we live in a world that is more and more inclined to try to view everything and classify everything in 2 dimensions. And that's my fear with what happens with large-scale assessment to some degree, as far as the takeaway from it, but also our viewpoint of large-scale assessment as well. And so when we're thinking about the children in our school, is EQAO, has it created it so that it's just about achievement and that we're not looking at the whole child? And I'm using the Ministry of Education's well-being visual, because I think one of the things that we need to be aware of as we modernize EQAO, we've learned a lot of lessons as a province in the last 21 years about the use of data and about the impact. And so one of the things that we talk about is our understanding that for some, EQAO does cause stress. And I was interested in Jean's comments this morning because I think we have to be very careful that anxiety disorder is something very specific, and we need to talk about that separately. And then there's a range of stress to distress. And one of the things that I think we would all agree upon is that stress and distress often come from a feeling of lack of control. So in the modernization approach for EQAO potentially, we could use technology to leverage a greater sense of teacher voice in the construct of the assessment and provide, more importantly, or as importantly, student voice. Right now, we have a sensitivity committee that looks at all of our assessment items to ensure that they're not alienating. But what that does not necessarily fulfill is a student seeing themselves within what they're reflected in the materials that we use. I met with a researcher this week at OISE who is using our materials to actually create algorithms where the students then, based on the readings that they choose, and they can choose whichever reading they want based on a title that speaks to their experience, and then the actual assessment of their critical thinking skill is they have to create 3 questions that they think are most important about what they've read. So really just starting to think about large-scale assessment and the potential that you could create it from a contextual point of view from the classroom level where teachers have opportunities to build from a menu, that students have opportunities for that personalization. We would then have an algorithm that could increase the feedback to parents and teachers so that it's much more detailed than what we currently do with EQAO data, and then have all of that build up so that we still have an understanding as a province and as districts and as schools where we need to support most in our resource allocation. So I think there's some real opportunities there to address some of those issues. Have to say, though, that when we talk about stress, it is an international situation where we are seeing, I think in the last PISA, 55% of students reported feeling very stressed writing a classroom assessment that they felt well prepared for. That's a lot. And they felt well prepared for that classroom assessment. For Canada, it was even higher. So I think that when we're thinking about what's important to measure and what we're supporting, we do need to, all of these areas aren't in competition with one another, they work together. And so through our assessment model moving forward, my hope would be that we provide opportunities to consider then all of these in tandem and understanding that they're interconnected, that one can't come at the expense of the other. I know many high-achieving students who aren't necessarily, who have well-being issues. And so the well-being becomes more important. One of my children, I've often said to her, you don't have to work so hard. And she said she thinks I'm the only mom who says that. But it's because I understand, that sense of balance that we want as parents and as educators is something that can be an opportunity through large-scale assessment, understanding where our students are feeling. I think their sense of belonging. So there's huge possibilities as far as how we access their sense of belonging. The EQAO does do a questionnaire with the assessment. And one of the things we are doing this year is reviewing that as a questionnaire as well, so that we can start to identify self-reflection from students on items like growth mindset. How open are they? How flexible are they in their thinking? Do they trust? Do they feel hopeful about their future? And do they understand that the more effort they put into something, the more likely it is that they will grow? And so to answer Annie's question in a long way, I came to EQAO because I hope that we can find a time where we find more common ground as a province around the role of large-scale assessment, that we can continue to use it where it is most valuable, and that is supporting an equity lens and ensuring that low expectations aren't a default because we're concerned about other pieces. When I started in my educational career, we were all about making sure that children were well fed and clothed and taking care of them. We need to continue to be about that and to be the positive adult in their life that they know we care about them. But it's unfair to them to limit us to only doing those pieces. And so that's why measuring some sense of academic criteria but one potentially that may look a little bit different based on the curriculum, and our assessments are connected directly to that curriculum. But as the curriculum becomes more about innovation, more about creativity, there's opportunities for us then to understand how that is being implemented and how students are learning so that we can support them in their journey. I think that the other piece is intellectual engagement and social engagement. And I think there's a huge opportunity for those students. Some students may be very high achieving, but they're not necessarily intellectually engaged. So there's good information that we can garner through these questionnaire data alongside the academic pieces that I'm hopeful through the modernization process we'll find our way to meeting better the needs. And we need to hear from Ontarians what they see as those most prioritized needs are for measuring through EQAO. So I'll leave it there, and thank you.